All right, so this is your Unit 3 exam, question number 1. Because of the fertile land and long growing seasons, plantations in 13 colonies generally developed in A, New England, B, the Middle Colonies, C, the South, or D, the Upper Mississippi River Valley. So where would one find plantations in the 13 colonies? New England, the Middle Colonies, the South, or the Upper Mississippi River Valley? Number 2. Number 2 lists some locations. So we have Jamestown, Virginia, Plymouth Colony, Massachusetts, and New Amsterdam, New York. These early colonial settlements are similar because each developed where? So what do these guys kind of have in common in terms of where they're located? Are they all at the base of a mountain range, along the coastline, in an arid climate, or on offshore islands? For number 3, it says the individual can only be free when the power of one government branch is balanced by the other two. And this is from Montesquieu, the Enlightenment thinker, in 1735. And it says, the idea expressed by this quote is best illustrated by which aspect in the U.S. government? Is it the existence of a cabinet, the elastic clause, separation of powers, or executive privilege? Again, he said, the individual can only be free when the power of one government branch is balanced by the other two. What does this execute? What does this show? What aspect of U.S. government does this show? Number 4, the trial of Peter Zenger, editor of the New York Weekly Journal, resulted in steps towards what? A, the right to bear arms, B, the right to petition, C, the freedom of press, or D, a rise in bias and fictional journalism. So this trial ended up leading to what? Developments in what? Think about, it's Peter Zenger, an editor of the New York Weekly Journal. Think about that. Number 5 asks about federalism. So it says, federalism, a concept and principle that remains debated today, is best defined as A, the absolute power, total power of the federal level of government. B, the ability for the government to change its powers. C, the limitation of one branch's power over another shall remain permanent. So one branch is limited and the other has more power. Or D, the division of power and responsibilities between state and national levels of government. So how can we define federalism? Number 6, following the drafting of the Constitution, the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists argued over which of the following concerning ratification of the Constitution. So what did the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists argue about before they would approve the Constitution? A, the addition of a Bill of Rights. B, the division of power amongst the three branches. C, the amount of slaves that would be counted towards a state's representation in Congress. Or D, what to do with the land after the proclamation of 1763 was nullified. So, no longer a thing. What did Anti-Federalists and Federalists argue about? Number 7, during Washington's presidency, which event showed the government's new willingness to use its authority best? What showed that the government was not afraid to use their power? Was it A, the Whiskey Rebellion, B, Shays Rebellion, C, a Declaration of Neutrality, or D, Washington's two-term precedent? Number 8, the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, family, self-appointed, or elective, may be justly pronounced as the very definition of tyranny. So having all power, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in one hand, one person, one family, one group of people controlling it. If you have all powers in one place, that's the definition of tyranny. So James Madison said this, and it asks, which feature of the U.S. Constitution was included to address this concern? Was it A, the Electoral College, B, checks and balances, C, the Bill of Rights, or D, the amendment process? Which one of these was created so that we didn't have to worry about all of the power being put into one hand, or one group of people, or one family? Number 9, the temperance movement focused on which of the following issues? A, ending slavery, B, prohibiting the sale and use of alcohol, C, enfranchising women, or D, eliminating tariffs? So which one of these was the temperance movement focused on? So A, ending slavery, B, prohibiting the sale, getting rid of, or making it illegal, the sale of or use of alcohol. C, enfranchising women, so making it so women had more rights. Or D, eliminating, getting rid of tariffs or taxes. What did the temperance movement focus on? Number 10, which presidential action is an example of the use of the unwritten Constitution? So which one of these is a part of the unwritten Constitution? It's not in the Constitution, but it's done anyway. A, signing a law passed by Congress. B, calling a meeting of the cabinet. C, ordering the Navy to patrol the Persian Gulf. Or D, nominating a federal judge to court. Which one of these is in the unwritten Constitution? Number 11, how did Alexander Hamilton's financial plan affect the economy of the U.S. during the 1790s? So Alexander Hamilton had a plan for what he wanted to see in the economy. How did that affect the economy in the U.S.? A, national tax revenues decreased, the amount that they make from taxes. B, high tariffs or taxes increased foreign trade. C, treasury policies contributed to widespread inflation, means that the money is worth more. Or D, the newly created Bank of the U.S. helped to stabilize the economy. How did Alexander Hamilton's financial plan affect the economy of the U.S.? Number 12, under the leadership of Chief Justice John Marshall, the Supreme Court expanded the influence of the national government by doing what? A, forcing states to grant relief from personal debt. B, authorizing or allowing the president to use troops without congressional approval, without Congress having to say yes. C, ending the importation of enslaved Africans, ending slaves coming to the U.S. Or D, strengthening federal powers over interstate commerce and banking. What did Chief Justice John Marshall do in the Supreme Court that expanded the powers of the national government? Number 13, according to the U.S. Constitution, the federal census is used to determine what? A, the size of the U.S. Supreme Court. B, the maximum number of cabinet members. C, apportionment of members in the House of Representatives, so how many people are going to be representing each state in the House of Representatives. Or D, the number of senators allotted to each state. So some of these don't change at all based on the census population, right? But one of these changes based on the population of the place where you live. Number 14, which power regarding the federal judiciary was established in Marbury versus Madison? A, the president appoints all federal judges. B, the Congress creates lower federal courts. C, members of the federal courts serve life terms. Or D, federal laws may be declared unconstitutional if they go against the Constitution. So which of these was determined in Marbury versus Madison? Number 15. During the presidency of George Washington, disagreements between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson over the interpretation of the Constitution contributed to what? So Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton were constantly fighting over how the Constitution should be interpreted. What did this end up leading to? All right, my apologies, I got interrupted. So I don't know where I was on question 15, but question 15 says, during the presidency of George Washington, disagreements between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson over the interpretation of the Constitution contributed to what? So Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson did not agree on how the Constitution should be interpreted. Several other people joined with them to say that they didn't agree. What did this lead to? A, the impeachment of federal judges. B, the defeat of the Whiskey Rebellion. C, the formation of political parties. Or C, the elimination of the Commerce Clause. So A, the impeachment of federal judges. Federal judges were impeached. B, the defeat of the Whiskey Rebellion. So the Whiskey Rebellion was defeated and ended. C, the formation of political parties. So political parties were put together. Or D, elimination or getting rid of the Commerce Clause. Number 16. One reason that President George Washington called for a policy of neutrality or remaining neutral in the 1970s was to what? A, improve his popularity among Federalists. B, avoid participation in European wars and avoid getting involved. C, gain support for the development of a U.S. Navy. So he wanted to make a Navy and he needed support. Or D, enforce the Treaty of Alliance with France. Why did George Washington want neutrality, staying neutral, not picking a side when it came to disagreements between other countries? Number 17, Thomas Jefferson was known to be a what kind of constructionist with his interpretation of the Constitution? Okay, was he an A, strict constructionist, so he believed that the Constitution should be followed to the letter, like you had just follow it as it's written? B, a loose constructionist, so he believed you can kind of interpret the Constitution a little bit, give it a little, leeway. C, impartial, which is just kind of he didn't pick a side between those. Or D, positive constructionist. I'm not sure what that would mean. Number 18, which of the following presidents declared European involvement in Latin America would be seen as an act of aggression? And they created a doctrine to say this. Was this A, Monroe, B, Washington, C, Adams, or D, Hamilton? Who said that Europe getting involved in Latin America would be seen as an act of war or an act of aggression against the United States? Monroe, Washington, Adams, or Hamilton? Number 19, The Monroe Doctrine was issued in part because of Napoleon's defeat and the fear of what? A First World War and alliance system. So they were afraid of a war happening. B, Napoleon attempting to take over the U.S. Did Napoleon try to take over the U.S.? C, a reinstatement of imperialistic policies by monarchs, so monarchs going out and trying to get more colonies again. Or D, European alliances with Native Americans. European countries allied with Native Americans, and that was something they were afraid of. Number 20. The main goal of Jefferson's interest in the Louisiana Territory was what? Why did Jefferson want the Louisiana Purchase, the Louisiana Territory? A, to expand the nation's territory. B, to remove Napoleon's influence in North America, get rid of Napoleon. C, because of trading with natives in the Mississippi region. Or D, to gain access to the port in New Orleans. Why did he want the Louisiana Territory? 21, the Warhawks. What did they want? A, they were opponents of territorial expansion. They didn't think that we should expand out to the West Coast. B, they were U.S. congressmen who represented the New England states. C, they supported going to war against Britain in the early 19th century. Or D, they were a Native American tribe who fought against the British in the War of 1812. What do we know about the Warhawks? Question number 22. Which was the most characteristic of the early factory systems in the U.S.? So what did that kind of look like, those early factory systems? A, factories provided workers with a voice in management and employment conditions, so they could speak up about their employment conditions to management and like how things were running. B, women and children were not allowed to work in factories. C, unsafe working conditions were common and dangerous. Or D, many workers had opportunities to move up in social class, make more money, move up in social class. Number 23. The era of good feelings refers to all of the following except what? A, a lack of political competition. B, economic prosperity, so a good economy due to Clay's system. C, relative military peace, so no war or, arguments with other countries. Or D, an ongoing struggle over federalism, so that's the balance of the state and federal powers. So which one of these doesn't fit into the era of good feelings? Number 24. In the 1840s, President James K. Polk's belief in manifest destiny led to what? So think about manifest destiny, this idea that we need to own all of the continents of the United States. It led to A, a war with Mexico over Texas and land in the West. B, an alliance with several South American countries. So alliance is when you're buddies, you make a deal. C, the establishment of new colonies in the Caribbean, so creating those new colonies. Or D, a ban on northern abolitionists in new states. So a ban on people who don't believe in slavery. So what did Polk's belief in manifest destiny end up leading to? Number 25. The Erie Canal contributed to the development of the U.S. by doing what? So think about where the Erie Canal is. What did it do? A, eliminating a need for railroads. We didn't need them anymore. B, linking the Great Lakes to the Atlantic coastline. So creating a link from the Great Lakes to the Atlantic. C, becoming the major trade route to California. Or D, allowing southern farmers to ship cotton to the West. Number 26, sectional differences. So those are differences in different parts of the U.S. Developed in the U.S. because why? A, the federal government adopted a policy of neutrality when dealing with foreign nations where they didn't pick a side. B, economic and social conditions and interests in each region varied. They were different. C, only Northerners were represented at the Constitutional Convention. Or D, early presidents favored urban areas over rural areas. They liked cities more than little towns. So what led to differences depending on where you lived in the U.S.? Okay, for 27, you have some titles here, so they're headlines, and it says, Compromise enables Maine and Missouri to enter the Union. California is admitted to the Union as a free state. The Kansas-Nebraska Act sets up popular sovereignty. And it says, which issue is reflected in these headlines? What do these headlines show? A, enactment of protective tariffs, so creation of protective taxes. B, the extension of slavery, so how slavery was handled throughout the U.S. C, voting rights for minorities. Or D, universal public education. Number 28. Before the Civil War, slavery expanded in the South rather than the North. Because why? Why was slavery in the South and not in the North? A, the Constitution contained a clause that outlawed the importation of slaves into the northern states. B, Congress passed a law forbidding slaves in the North. C, northern states passed affirmative action legislation. Or D, geographic conditions in the South encouraged the development of large plantations or farms. Number 29, a house divided itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently being half slave and half free. So according to this quotation, Abraham Lincoln believed what? A, that slavery was immoral, against morals, and should be abolished immediately, gotten rid of. B, sectional differences depending on where you live in the United States, threatened to destroy the Union. C, the southern states should be allowed to secede or leave the Union. Or D, to save the nation, the North should compromise with the South and allow slavery. What did Abraham Lincoln believe when he said, this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free? For number 30, you have a little passage here and you have to decide, what would the writer of this document most likely support? So it says, for the last 10 years, we have had numerous and serious causes of complaint against our non-slaveholding Confederate states, with reference to the subject of African slavery. They have endeavored to weaken our security, to disturb our domestic peace and tranquility, and persistently refuse to comply with their express constitutional obligations to us in reference to that property, and by the use of their power in the federal government have striven to deprive us of an equal enjoyment of the common territories of the Republic. Okay, so what would the writer of this document probably support? Would they support A, emancipation of minorities, so making all minorities free? B, the Underground Railroad? C, abolition, so getting rid of slavery entirely? Or D, secession, the South separating from the North into two separate countries? Number 31. The women's rights movement found their first success by doing what? A, passing the 19th Amendment. B, having a female senator in 1820. C, drafting the Declaration of Sentiments, creating the Declaration of Sentiments. Or D, receiving equal pay for equal work. What was the first thing that women's rights movements were able to do? Their first bit of success. Number 32, the growth in demand for slaves during the 1800s was most directly impacted by what? Why did they suddenly need more slaves? There's growth. A, an increase in foreign affairs. B, finding golf in the Mississippi. So they're playing golf now. C, passing the Emancipation Proclamation. Or D, Eli Whitney's creation of the cotton gin. Number 33. After the Trail of Tears, the Cherokees were forced to move to and develop A, areas void of resources or empty of resources. B, floodlands east of the Mississippi. C, desert areas in the Mexican border area. Or D, coastal territories in the Gulf. So where do they have to move and develop those lands? Number 34. This work of fiction helped increase the abolition movement in the North. So which work of fiction helped to increase the abolition movement? And abolition is getting rid of slavery. A, The Liberator. B, Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. C, A Call to Arms. Or D, Uncle Tom's Cabin. And number 35, what does secede mean? A, end slavery. B, separate from something. C, to purchase. Or D, to force. What does secede mean? And then the map on the bottom, all you need to do is you need to look at the word bank, and there are 5 different purchase areas or like territory areas, the names. So you have Oregon Country, Mexican Cession, Louisiana Purchase, Republic of Texas, Gadsden Purchase. So you just need to take those letters and label the area on the map that's represented, that represents that spot. Okay, just label the map.